Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Yeah, good morning. Welcome to Cloud Computing session. Our first presenter is Jelly from University of Virginia, and he's going to talk about MODIS, the MODIS system.
Okay, so good morning. My name is Jelly, and today I will present our work in the construction of MODIS satellite data reprojection and reduction pipeline in Windows Azure. So this work was originally an internship work in Microsoft Research and Lawrence Berkeley Lab, and has now continued to be a joint effort between University of Virginia eScience group and University of California at Berkeley and Lawrence Berkeley Lab Microsoft Research. So eScience today has entered a data-intensive computing era in which the increase in data availability is much faster than the increase in computational power. So in recent years, many large scientific equipments has been deployed to produce continuously large amount of data. And also, the emerging large-scale, inexpensive, ground-based sensors has further provided ubiquitous data availability. So this nearly explosive increase in data has provided a rich repository for scientific discoveries, and more science applications are now applying large-scale data-intensive computational models with increasing complexities. However, a problem many scientists are still facing today in data-intensive computing is that how to process the raw data in order to produce the scientific results. There is usually a huge gap between the raw data and the final scientific results. And sometimes scientists can even do nothing with the raw data, even though they're right there. There are several reasons for this problem. For example, scientists often meet with some kind of barriers when they need to process the raw data. First, they may have computational resource entry barriers. This is especially true for some small research groups in which they may have very limited local computational resources. But even for some larger groups who can have access to some national scale supercomputing centers, the system level support provided by those centers may still be constrained, and they may not be flexible enough to provide the scalability as required by different applications. And the other type of barriers is what we call data entry barriers. So data entry barriers involves many aspects in data processing, and three common ones are listed here. The first barrier is data collection. Scientists today are usually not limited to a single data source, but rather they tend to do more comprehensive analysis over multiple sources of data. So these data must be collected and assembled into a common place. And the second barrier is data transformation. So these multiple data sources may have very heterogeneous data formats and misaligned data properties, so they must be transformed into a unified format before scientists can do analytical computation. And the third barrier is data management. So such huge amounts of data requires very deliberate software architectures to orchestrate the complex scientific workflows and to help manage the huge data sets. And these barriers are more of computer technology domain problems rather than science domain problems. But they are very common in many data-intensive science research today. So this raises a question: do scientists need to be computer experts as well? But fortunately, we think the answer could be no. And in this presentation, I will introduce a particular instance of this problem and discuss how we can propose solutions to lower the barriers for scientists. And our specific project involves the MODIS satellite data processing. And MODIS is short for Moderate Resolution Imaging Spectral Radiometer. This is the key instrument on board two satellites called Terra and Aqua, which were launched in 1999 and 2002, respectively. And these two satellites are viewing the entire Earth's surface every 1 to 2 days and are acquiring data in 36 different spectral bands. And these data are further processed and separated into multiple data products, such as atmosphere products and land products and ocean products, etc. And this MODIS is also playing a vital role in the development of global interactive Earth system models. So here are some application examples in which scientists can apply the MODIS data in their scientific research. In the first case, our scientist Ines from UC Berkeley wants the surface temperature data across the globe at 100 kilometer resolution as the input for her climate model. And in the second model, our scientist Bev Law from Oregon State University wants the monthly leaf area index for the year 2003 over the Metallier's Ameriflux Tower sites to compare the satellite data with her ground-based sensor data. So in the third case, our scientist Yang-Will Rao wants also from UC Berkeley, wants 4 different atmosphere products and 5 different land products across the whole US area for all years when data are available at 1 kilometer resolution and the finest time granularity available to investigate the land evapotranspiration. Actually, we've been working with Yang-Will during this whole summer, and his application has become our first working example. As for now, scientists who want to use MODIS data in their research have met all the data entry barriers we mentioned above. As for data collection, the MODIS source data are published across multiple FTP sites, and the metadata were separately maintained and not convenient for query. As for data transformation, different data products have different time granularities and space imaging resolutions. An even worse situation was that different products have different geographic project types, the so-called swath type and the sinusoidal type. So if scientists want to do analysis over multiple data products which have different project types, we have to reproject the swath type source data files into the sinusoidal files, so that to provide a uniform format for the scientists. We'll talk about the details about the reprojection later. And for the data management, in our working example, we need to process totally 10 years of our interested MODIS data products for the whole US area. And we need to download and then process around 585,000 source data files, which requires thousands of CPU hours and several terabytes of data storage. An important feature of this task is that all these source data processing tasks can be are totally embarrassingly parallel. So this gives us enough reason to leverage the most advanced supercomputing technologies to finish our mission. So we have proposed a cloud-based solution in which we constructed a MODIS data reprojection and reduction pipeline in Microsoft Windows Azure Cloud Computing Platform. So we can significantly reduce lower the resource entry barriers for scientists by leveraging the high flexibility and scalability of cloud computing. And also the complexities involved in data collection, reprojection, and management are totally hidden from the domain scientists. And they can easily interact with our pipeline by using a web portal interface. And finally, we provided a generic reduction service for our scientists to upload their arbitrary executables to perform scientific analysis work on those reprojected data. So this pipeline can automatically fulfill all these complex tasks for our scientists. Okay, so I have to interrupt here to show you, to initialize a demo because it takes some time to finish. So I will show you the web. This is the Azure management web UI. So as you can see, we've deployed one web portal, which is Azure web role, and we also had a background processing instance in which we have 150 different types of worker roles. We'll discuss that later. And now we'll go directly to the web portal. So this is the web application hosted in Azure. So we will request for a reduction service, and this is currently a preliminary interface which works for our example. So we will request days. I will request day 1 to day 15 here, and for satellites I will choose Terra, and I will input my email here because I will receive notification emails about the status. And so this is the dialog box which I can upload an arbitrary executable file. So as my reduction stage executable. So, but here I will just use the default executable for our working example. And for the target tiles means different locations. So geographic locations, I will only choose one. So, and then I will submit my request.
So how do you know where those are?
Oh, you mean for the geographic locations?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, this is just, a kind of a convention which is used in the geographic field. So these actually are totally 15 geographic locations which divided the whole US area. So yeah, this is just a convention. So the H means horizontal index, and the V means the vertical index, which divided, makes a gridded global. Yeah. So yeah, if you want more details, yeah, I can show you later.
Well, I guess the question is there a way of putting in which one?
A map, yeah. So actually we are really in a preliminary phase of our web interface. In the future, we will show more kind of intuitive. So okay, as you already see, I've already received an email notification which saying reduction job already created, and it shows the summary of our request, day 1 to day 15. Okay, so we'll just wait while the background is processing our request and get back. So before I introduce our pipeline architecture, I want to first introduce some basic features of Windows Azure platform. So the computation abstraction as provided by Windows Azure is called hosted services. It consists two different types of roles. The web role is a web application which is accessible via an HTTP. And the worker role is a background processing application. So both developers can specify a different number of both type of work of the roles at the deployment. And also, Windows Azure has provided the dynamic scalability support, in which, as with the recently released so-called management API, we can also upgrade the numbers of instances during runtime. And also, Windows Azure provided 3 main storage services, which is in abstraction of the storage. So the first type is blob service. This is the storage for those entities such as binary files and data files. And the queue service, this is a reliable, persistent queue model for messaging within and between the hosted services. And the table services is our structured storage in the form of tables and with simple query support. And this slide shows an overview of our data processing pipeline. So as we can see, it mainly consists of three different stages: the data collection stage, the reprojection stage, and the analysis reduction stage. And users can submit their request through the Azure web role by using our web portal interface. And the request will be sent to the pipeline for processing. And in each stage, a single task will not be initialized until the input are all ready for that specific type for that specific task. And in each stage, there are different numbers of Azure worker roles. So for that specific type of, such as data collection tasks and the reprojection tasks, and also reduction tasks. And as we see, by using the management API, we can dynamically adjust the numbers of worker role instances. So we can provide a high flexibility and scalability for our service to fulfill different application requirements.
Where in the process did you specify which MODIS products you wanted? I mean, I saw where you specified applications, but
yes. So we are kind of in an early stage for our web interface design, and this interface only works for our working example. As I mentioned, there's a science environmental research group in UC Berkeley currently using the application, but in the near future we'll provide a more generic interface, like user can specify different data products and like different reduction logic, that kind of stuff. Okay, so I'll go over each stage in more details. We put the data collection into a single independent stage because the data collection itself is a complex process, because first there are huge numbers of source data files, and each only covers a small fraction of the geographic area. And also the metadata for each source data files, such as the time frame and the area coverage, were maintained as Azure tables. And so if we need to fetch a source data file which covers a specific time frame and area, we have to query the metadata in Azure table. And this table 1 shows the data product properties for the whole US continent over 10 years, which is for our, again, working example. As we see, the number of source data files ranges from tens to hundreds of thousands source data files, and the data size ranges from tens of gigabytes to several terabytes. And the total size for 10 years will be around 4 terabytes of storage and almost around 600,000 of source data files. So as for the reprojection process, as we saw, there are huge numbers of source data files, and we can put all those reprojection tasks into totally parallel single tasks. So this picture shows an idea about how the reprojection is done. So in the left picture shows the source data, which are in swath format. But what our scientists need is the so-called sinusoidal format of data, in which we have to rearrange the data points in the source data into a kind of regular shaped and regularly arranged data format. So as you can roughly see, the shaped area consists of 3 separate source data files. And in order to make the target sinusoidal file, it's not a case of simple cut and paste, but rather it involves quite complex computation. And as this figure shows, the zoom-in view for our previous slide. So the large circle points are actually the data points from the source data, and the little dots are the data points in our target data files. So there's kind of misalignment there. For the target data file, we have millions of data points, but in the source data files, we have kind of in tens of thousands of data points. So to find the value for each data point, we have to find the geographical nearest point to fit into that data point. So as we need to process the data file pixel by pixel, so it is really compute intensive and time consuming process. And to generate a single target tile, it usually takes about several minutes to finish. Next, I will discuss some of our early experiences with the reduction service. So we want to provide the support for arbitrary reduction executable tool upload, because we think it can bring a lot of benefits for our scientists. For example, scientists are then free to use most up-to-date scientific processing tools and generate most advanced results. And also, it can significantly reduce the scientific process development time across multiple iterations, because scientists will no longer depend on the assist of some computer developers to modify the architecture for them. And also, we want to particularly discuss the problem of running MATLAB tool in Azure, because we think MATLAB is really very commonly used by our scientists in their analysis work. So we cannot install MATLAB in Azure because Azure doesn't provide an administrator privilege in their raw instances. But even if we can install MATLAB, there are still potentially some legal license issues which are still not clear today. So we chose the alternative by running standalone executables, which can be generated by the MATLAB compiler from those MATLAB code as made by scientists. So there are still some tricks there to resolve the library dependencies to running those standalone executables in Azure, but I have not enough time to explain it here. So if you are interested, we can definitely talk about that after the talk. And finally, we also tested the Java-based scientific tools, and they are also supported as long as we deploy the appropriate Java libraries along with our application. So next, I want to talk about the task scheduling in Azure. So the task scheduling model as provided by Azure is based on queues and tables. So here I will use reprojection stage as an example. So when scientists send a user request to the pipeline will first pass the request into a service request message and then send it to the queue. And then the service manager here, which is the reprojection service manager, will further parse the request into a large number of single parallel tasks, reprojection tasks. And for each reprojection task, it will also keep track of the queue messages from the collection stage, as we need to rely on the data collected in the first stage to initialize a specific reprojection task. So whenever the inputs are already in the storage, it will dispatch the task into the reprojection task queue. And also there are a number of worker role instances which are doing the reprojection task, and they keep fetching tasks from this queue. And when they finish the reprojection, they will send the result file into the Azure blob storage, and also they will update the corresponding status in a few numbers of tables. So these reprojected data are all aligned and in a unified format, so they can be sent to the next stage for scientific reduction computation. So in such a large-scale, data-intensive, distributed computing environment, tasks can fail for many reasons. So we have to prepare for that. And there are a few some example reasons here. So the source data files may be broken or missing from the FTP sites. So specific projection task may not be able to finish. And also the reduction tool by scientists may run in misfunction and crash during the execution. And finally, there can occasionally be some unpredictable system errors which happen to the Azure services. So we, okay. So the fault tolerance. So we implemented the service monitor, which keeps track of the status of each active task. So we will the ability includes restart the task and cancel a task if it fails after several numbers of retries, and also all the service status are persistent in Azure tables. So if the service monitor itself crashes, it can still resume the status when it gets running again. Okay, this slide shows some preliminary result by running multiple instances of Azure worker roles and we use an example as 1,500 reprojection tasks running in different numbers of instances, and also by estimation running that on desktop. So in Windows Azure, the tasks can be finished in no more than several hours. But as an estimation, to process the same task on the desktop, it requires like days to finish. And this shows that we can get as high as like 90x speed up for the task. Okay, so in conclusion, we have significantly lowered the resource and data entry barriers for scientists to conduct research on MODIS data, and we leverage the Windows Azure cloud computing to provide high flexibility and scalability. And also, our architecture can be easily modified to incorporate other eScience applications with similar computation patterns. So in the future work, I will specifically want to talk about the validation, the requirement of a validation process for those arbitrary uploaded reduction tools, because we cannot guarantee a scientist will always upload correct functional tools, or it can be vulnerable to some malicious uploads. So we have to prepare for that, but that remains to be an open question. And also, we are interested in applying MapReduce frameworks such as Dryad and Dryad-Link in future. All right, check out. So I'll take. Oh, unfortunately, it seems the server is still processing our task. But I've requested the tasks before. So finally, it will kind of send us back a link to the results by running our reduction tool. So we can simply download the package to our local machines. All right, thank you. And do you have any questions? Thanks.
So we have time for a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So in your performance comparison, you compare cloud computing with desktop.
Yeah.
But in cloud computing, how many CPU use, and in desktop, how many CPU use? That's comparison.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I didn't have enough time to explain that. So as we can see from the comparison, this is really a kind of high-end desktop we have in the research group. So it has kind of almost double the frequency and double the memory of the equivalent single Azure instance. So we expect that for single instance comparison, the desktop outperforms the Azure. But by running multiple instances, right, as in our pipeline architecture, so we can still gain like 90x speed up by running 150 instances. So as for a fair comparison, right, so we didn't provide a precise result in the testing on the desktop because it takes days to finish and we haven't been able to do that. So this is based on the average time, right? We run a few number of single tasks and get the average to get the estimation of the overall time. So we just want to give scientists a sense like how faster they can get results back by using Windows Azure, rather than if they have like very limited computational resource on their research group, such as a single desktop. So we can make that much faster.
We have time for one more question.
Yes?
I think I heard you were using nearest neighbor when you're reprojecting data.
Yes.
Have scientists requested more than that? And is nearest neighbor okay for them, or it's just kind of what you're available?
Yeah, currently we only support the nearest neighbor type of reprojection. And in the future, we will kind of implement like some other types of, there's a few numbers of methods. But this one fits to the working example, specific working example as required by our scientists. So we make this as a first choice. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.